Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome at this webinar organized by Renocally. Today we are comparing energy efficiency policies and renovation initiatives in Central and Eastern Europe and the Western Balkans. And we'll present some practical cases from Slovakia and Serbia. As people are still entering the room, we will give people 1 minute, and that gives me some time to say some words about the speakers that will be with us today. And to explain you a bit about the webinar etiquette. We are here to have an exchange. So if you have any questions, please share them in the chat. During the panel discussion and the Q&A session afterwards, we'll be very happy to answer your questions. You are already muted, so please, if you're unmuted, make sure that you do not speak through the presentations. Yeah, we're looking forward to receive your questions and have a discussion all together. So today we have quite a filled program. First, I'll start off introducing the project, but also setting the scene for the discussion and the presentations of the others. Afterwards, I'll present something on the EPBD recast, specifically provisions relevant for building renovation passports and public authorities. After that, we have an example from building renovation passport that's currently being developed in Slovakia. We'll focus there on the experiencing of developing this building renovation passport, and also get some recommendations. Afterwards, we'll have a brief overview of the energy efficiency policy in Serbia and public schemes for renovations of buildings. And the last presentation focuses on financial programs for public buildings in Serbia. And we have today a great list of experts that join us. So among others, Jana Betsalova. She's executive manager at ENBI, the Environment and Building Energy Efficiency organization, and a Slovak private consultancy company that brings together experts with years of experience in the field of energy performance of buildings. She has a lot of experience with technical and legal implementation of energy performance of buildings directive in the EU and non-EU countries. And she's besides that also task leader in several EU projects and has participated in EU member states standby committees for the transposition of the EPPD. So it's great to have Jana with us. She'll be presenting the example of the building renovation passport in Slovakia. Then I'm also delighted to be able to introduce you to Antonella Solujic. She's senior advisor energy efficiency at the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Serbia. She is a graduate mechanical engineer and graduated from the Faculty of Mechanical Engineering at the University of Belgrade. She was an employee of the Ministry of Mining and Energy, working on policy development and drafting the legal framework in the field of energy efficiency. So it's great to have her here today to explain us about the policy framework in Serbia. And she participated in several specialized training on energy efficiency, renewable energy sources, sustainable development, and climate change. So she has represented the Republic of Serbia in the Energy Efficiency Task Force and the coordination group of the energy community, and has been a member of the negotiation group for EU accession for Chapter 15 of energy. So it's great to have also Antonella here. Unfortunately, Tanja Svetkovic could not join us this morning. She was supposed to give a presentation on the financing programs for public buildings in Serbia, but as technical advisor in the Ministry of Energy and Mining, she got a last-minute call to prepare a meeting for the minister this morning, so she will not be joining us. But Antonella has been so kind to cover part of what was in her presentation. So thanks for that, Antonella. You'll both also get the opportunity to briefly introduce yourselves when your slides come up. But let me just say that from our sides, we're very happy to have you on board. And after we hear the presentations, there will be a part for time for a moderated panel discussion in which I will discuss with our panelists challenges related to building innovation in Slovakia and Serbia, feasibility of implementing the new EPBD provisions, opportunities for technology, and recommendations. After that, we will close our webinar. So now I'll just start with setting the scene. And that starts with the Renocally project. In our case, that's the context in which we are organizing this webinar. And Renocally is supported by the IKE initiatives funded by the German Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action. And Renocally focuses on capacity building among municipalities in Slovakia, Romania, and Bulgaria. And we focus our capacity building efforts on building renovation passports and renovation financing, because we believe that these are two essential pieces of the puzzle in order to increase renovation rates. Methods we apply are, among other, trainings for experts to develop building renovation passports, but also really implementing these passports for municipalities in Bulgaria and Romania and Slovakia, so they get hands-on experience in collecting the data and seeing the benefits of the results from these passports. Our project will finish in January next year, so we're coming towards the end, and we're very excited to also have Jana explain and present some of the results that we are currently getting from Slovakia. Now, why are we talking about renovations? Why is this important? And we see that renovation rates are very low in Europe. So you see the graph in the middle. The deep renovation rates are not coming above 0.5%. While we know that in order to save energy, but also stop the deterioration of our environment, it's very important that we reduce emissions of buildings, because these are very significant. But at the moment, there are several crises that make it challenging to renovate buildings. So we have the inflation and the energy crisis, which really drive up costs, reduces the budgets available for public authorities and households. But we also see that it's unevenly distributed within Europe. So we see that in certain regions there are higher renovation rates than in others. And specifically in Central and Eastern Europe, we see that the renovation share of the market is also lower than in Western Europe, for example. So when we look at the consumption of energy that the building stock is responsible for, we see that within the European Union, it's responsible for plus minus 40% of final energy consumption and 36% of emissions. So this is significant. In the Western Balkans, we see that residential buildings consume between 30 and 60%, ranging between which country you look at. And on average, it's good for 34% of final energy consumption. So this is huge. At the same time, we know that a large share of buildings within Europe have been built before 2000, in times when there were no strict energy efficiency requirements. And around 3/4 of these buildings have a poor energy performance. So that means that there is a very big challenge to actually upgrade the existing building stock and make sure that we save energies, save costs, and also save our environment. Now, a very unique challenge to Central and Eastern Europe and the Western Balkans is that there's a very high private ownership rate compared to, for example, Germany. I'm living in Germany, and in Germany, around 50% of buildings is rented. Now, if we look at, for example, Slovakia, this is around only 10% that's being rented, so 90% is in private hands. You see that in a country like Serbia, it's around 95% is privately owned. So this means that there is a higher responsibility for households to take responsibility here, and specifically in times when budget is tight. This lowers the capacity for households to renovate buildings. Now, the EU is aware of challenges to building renovation and has initiated several policies and initiatives to increase renovation rates and make sure there's more funding available. Examples are the Renovation Wave initiative. Funding got available through the Recovery and Resilience Facility, but we also had the Fit for 55 program and the Green Deal, which really set up a legislative process in which different important policies have been updated. like, for example, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. But we also see that there is more focus for economic and investments in the Western Balkans, for example, through the Economic and Investment Plan. Now, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive is the flagship initiative by the European Commission to improve the energy performance of buildings, and it has been adopted this year. When we look at the timeline, then around the 12th of March, there was an approval of the compromise agreement reached in December by the European Parliament and the Council. And on the 8th of May, the new EPPD recast was published in the official journal of the European Union. On the 29th of May, so that's really very short time ago, it's like last week basically, the transposition of then, or on 8th of May, the publication was, and the 29th of May of 2026 is the transposition deadline of the EPPD in 2 years, which means that at that time, all the provisions within the EPPD recast, which I'll be talking about, will have to be implemented on member state level. And at the end of 2027, the European Commission will start reviewing the effects of this directive and provide updates and recommendations if necessary. Now, in the Renocally project, we've published a report recently focusing really on enabling local authorities to lead the decarbonization of existing buildings. We see that local authorities have special responsibilities and also opportunities to lead the decarbonization of buildings. And in our report, a lot of the information that I'll be sharing in these slides for myself, you can find also there. And we will also share the link at the end of the presentation. So when we look at the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, there is a lot of information in there. So here you see an overview of all the different articles, what they focus on, and related annexes. And today we will not focus on all of this. We'll focus on a specific subset of articles that we believe are specifically relevant for local authorities to decarbonize buildings. These are the National Building Renovation Plans, minimum energy performance standards and progressive renovation trajectories, solar energy in buildings, the zero emission building standard. For the Renocally project, very important, the renovation passports, but also financial incentives, skills and market barriers, one-stop shops and information, which all focus on providing the finance and the information necessary to renovate. So what are national building renovation plans? The national building renovation plans are basically strategies that set a long-term and also intermediate goals for the building stock transformation at national level. It includes a section, for example, providing statistics on the building stock, like the age, the topology, and floor area of specific building typologies in a country, but also the energy performance, and recently also an important theme, the households living in energy poverty, so the social dimension. Besides giving statistics, it also should provide an overview of planned and implemented policies. So basically, how do governments plan to achieve the long-term and intermediate goals that they have set for building stock transformation, but also information and measures and tools enabled to provide the necessary information to local authorities, but also households and companies to actually make the renovations and measures they take to alleviate energy poverty. So over the last years, a lot of discussion has been held around the minimum energy performance standards. And in the end, in the EPBD recast, the minimum energy performance standards only apply to non-residential buildings. So basically, a minimum energy performance standard says that as of a specific year, all buildings in the building stock should achieve a specific performance. For this, a maximum performance threshold had been set. So what does that mean? The Commission has said, okay, we look at what is the performance of the buildings around 2020, and we say that we draw a line at 16% and say all the 16% worst performing buildings need to be renovated by a specific timeline. So in this case, it says by 2030, all buildings below the 16% threshold should be renovated, and by 2033, all the ones below a 26% threshold, also based on 2020. Now, this sounds relatively complicated, and it is. Now, the European Commission is aware of this, and they are preparing technical guidance for member states, and they are consulting the member states for all their questions. And the guidance is expected by the end of this year. So, the European Commission will help member states to draw these thresholds and also make sure that they know how to implement that in legislation. For residential buildings, it's a different situation. So here we're talking about progressive renovation trajectories. So rather than looking at specific buildings, the trajectories look at the average of the entire building stock. And here the goal is to decrease average primary energy consumption kilowatt hours per square meter over the entire stock compared to baseline year 2020. So by 2030, this average primary energy use should be decreased by at least 16%. And by 2035, by 20 to 22%. Now, 55% of the decrease should be achieved among the worst performing buildings. You can see here that this is formulated in a way that gives a lot of flexibility to member states in order to define how they will achieve it and which buildings will actually be renovated. That was done on purpose also because of concerns for strict regulations that might have negative effects on households that already struggle to make ends meet at the end of the month. So it's still to be seen also in the guidance that will be published by the end of the year, exactly how the progressive renovation trajectories will be shaped. And we can expect differences between countries. Going on, we look at solar energy in buildings. So member states should ensure solar panels are installed on new and existing buildings where feasible, technically and economically. So this is important to reduce our fossil electricity consumption. And from basically the beginning of 2027, this should already be done on all new public and non-residential buildings larger than 250 meters. And afterwards, these requirements are being fed into other types of buildings. So basically by 2028, for all existing public buildings with a useful floor area of more than 2,000 meters, so big buildings, and then 750 square meters by 2029 and 250 meters by 2030. That means that there will be a big impulse for public authorities to start installing solar panels on public buildings in the coming 5-6 years. And member states shall establish and make publicly available criteria at national level for the practical implementation of the obligations set out in the article. So again, member states should provide information so that everyone knows how these type of provisions have to be implemented. And make sure that these criteria are in accordance to the technical and economic potential for solar installations and building characteristics. Closely related to this is the zero emission building standard. So the EPBD on the long run aims to achieve a decarbonized building stock. And for that, it's important that buildings do not emit emissions anymore. So the zero emission building standard sets out this long-term goal. So zero emission buildings shall not cause any on-site emissions from fossil fuels and have the capacity to react to external signals by changing energy use, generation, and storage. Now, member states may define the maximum threshold of total primary energy use for zero emission buildings. So they can do that at national level. And there is here leeway to be more progressive depending on the ambition of national governments. But this at least should be lower, 10% lower than the current near zero energy building standards. And the zero emission building standard will start applying also in a phased manner to different types of buildings. So it will apply for all new public buildings starting from 2028. But then it applies to all buildings as of 2030. Until that period, the NZEP standards will continue to apply. Deep renovations, the topic very important for renovation passports, should focus on transforming buildings into NZEP until 2030 and ZEP as of 2030, where technically and economically feasible. So that shows that the ambition of deep renovations should be to actually decarbonize buildings on the long run. And that brings us to renovation passports, because renovation passports are tools that enable the renovation on the long term with like a long-term goal in mind. So renovation passports are tailored roadmaps for deep renovation of a specific building in a maximum number of steps that will significantly improve its energy performance. That's how it's being defined in the EPBD. So all member states must implement voluntary building renovation passport schemes, but they may decide to make them obligatory. So that means that by the transposition deadline that we just mentioned in 2026, all member states must have voluntary building renovation passport schemes. Roadmaps for individual buildings in these building renovation passports should achieve NZEP before 2030 and ZEP as of 2030. So basically linking to the zero emission building standards. And what is the benefit of this is that it enables staged renovation. So it allows to spread out renovation costs without making expensive mistakes. And I believe that one of the colleague presenters will dive a bit deeper into the benefits of building renovation passports. These renovation passports should also link to financing and information and to the energy performance certificates. And when linking the building renovation passports to an energy performance certificates, the recommendations that are provided in the building renovation passports to achieve the long-term renovation targets should replace the existing recommendations in energy performance certificates. And there are certain projects that have already piloted how this can be done. For example, the IB Road to EPC project. Now, BRP should be made available in a digital format, and member states should strive to provide digital tools to prepare and, where appropriate, update building renovation passports. So the benefit of digitalization here could be that if you implement one step of the renovation, it's a digital file. You can actually update that in your renovation passport. And these passports should then be stored in national databases for energy performance of buildings. Now, the benefits of these tools will be to avoid expensive mistakes and lock-ins, besides spreading out the investment costs. And Jana will provide you some insights in how that works in practice. Now, some last point related to building renovation passports is that the EPBD sets out certain mandatory design features that should be included in these national schemes and optional design features. Again, giving member states flexibility to determine how ambitious they want these tools to make. So the mandatory design features, which I'll focus on in this presentation, include the current energy performance of the building, a graphical roadmap and renovation steps, information on national requirements, for example, the minimum energy performance standards or the fossil boiler phase out, and explaining the best sequencing of the steps. So do you first insulate your buildings before you start changing the heating system? Or you first insulate your roof before you put solar panels on top of them? Now, for each of these steps, name and description of the measures should be provided, the estimated energy savings, primary and final, estimated reduction of operational greenhouse gas emissions, and the estimated savings on the energy bill. Now, if you implement specific steps, it's also useful to know what your improved performance will be in terms of energy class, so this should also be included for each step. Moreover, there should be information on possible connections to district heating and cooling, the share of individual collective generation of renewable energy, improving the construction product circularity and life cycle global warming potential, and information available on funding, technical advice, and other types of services. So it's in brief, a tool that really brings different types of information together in an overview to make it clear for the building owner, whether that's a public authority or a household, what benefits can be expected by making the renovations and guiding them to do it in the right order. Now, if you have that type of information, you still need access to funding in order to be able to implement the renovation. And for that, the EPBD sets out that member states should provide appropriate financing to implement their national building renovation plans, what we started the presentation with, but also to ensure simple and streamlined applications for public funding, so to reduce the bureaucratic efforts that are required to get access. For example, through the use of energy efficiency funds that already exist in many countries, and at the same time require member states to introduce effective safeguards to protect vulnerable households. Now, other tools or institutions, I should say, that should really help improve access to information are one-stop shops. So one-stop shops are really centers, one place where you can go with all your questions related to renovations. For example, by providing streamlined information on technical and financial possibilities. So one-stop shops should be designed to provide holistic support to all households, particularly households affected by energy poverty, and they may offer dedicated service. Now, one-stop shops are possible institutions that could promote the use of building renovation passports, but there's also a close link with local authorities that might, on the one hand, enable and support the establishment of one-stop shops, but also being locations or centers of expertise where people working in local authorities can go if they want to renovate buildings. Now, lastly, there should be information and awareness raising campaigns in order to make sure that basically all types of stakeholders are aware of the fact that these services exist and also of the requirements that are in legislation. There should be guidance for underrepresented groups and again for vulnerable households, and there should also be dedicated support for local and regional authorities to training. I think that highlights again our point that there's a special role for public authorities in general and local authorities specifically to help implementing and transposing the EPBD recast. So in brief, member states must implement voluntary building renovation passport schemes. Building renovation passports are key tools to support local authorities and others in decarbonizing their buildings. National building renovation plans will summarize actions foreseen at national level. Public authorities should ensure the installation of solar PV on public buildings, new and existing, by specified timelines. And the building renovation passports, they are most effective when integrated with other tools and when they're digitalized. So digital building logbooks, energy performance certificates, and one-stop shops, while they also should link to financial support. Now, this presentation mainly focuses on the EPBD, but to close, I would shortly want to touch upon other relevant policy files because the EPBD is not there in isolation. Specifically, the Energy Efficiency Directive also has provisions that are particularly relevant for public authorities. They stress the exemplary role of public authorities, for example, by setting out a requirement to renovate 3% of the floor area annually, and by achieving energy saving obligations of 1.9% final energy consumption. Plus, it sets again out, it stresses the importance of information and awareness raising and empowering vulnerable customers. And at the same time, we've seen the Repower EU plan as a reaction to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which really highlights the importance of saving energy and targets the building stock as a big energy consumer. So, for example, to installing a lot of heat pumps and accelerating rooftop PV. So if you want more information, have a look at our report. The link will be provided at the end. And on that note, I would like to give the floor to Jana to share an example of a building renovation passport that's currently being developed in Slovakia. So Jana, if you're ready, I can stop sharing the screen and you can take over. We cannot hear you yet.
So good morning, everybody. So I will try to share.
Yeah.
So do you see my
We can see it,
screen
yes.
now? Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Now it should be presenting mode. So, I will continue in future explanation of what is building renovation passport, and I will focus on our work on this as NB as private consultancy company was hired to produce this building renovation passport for this project Renocally. So I will present experience and also recommendations. So just to recap, why building renovation passport is needed. So it is mostly because suboptimal renovation is a huge potential for lock-in effect. We know that building renovation cycle is quite long, 20, 30 years. And a stage renovation must be carefully planned to avoid that one renovation step disables subsequent steps. So step-by-step renovation can be a solution to address high initial costs. Building renovation passport should always provide roadmap for stage renovations that leads to zero emission buildings that has to be defined by member states in the future. So what should it contain is specified in Annex 8 in revised EPBD from April to 2024, and it gives a common framework. I will focus on the features that are connected with practical implementation of this renovation passport. So it should be based on on-site inspection, on dialogue with building owners, should provide optimal sequences of steps and timing of steps, and take into account the lifetime of measure, but also the lifetime on existing constructions and systems. So it should provide information about each step, about savings in terms of primary energy, final energy, and CO2 emissions, but not only about this, because it should provide also information about expected benefits, which are additional to energy savings. So these are reduced costs, improved comfort, improved smart readiness, and so on. So it requires more indicators than mandatory EPC. And it should be expressed in some user-friendly form for owners. So there is always some graphical presentation. So what is situation in Slovakia today? So official building renovation passport is not in place, but is currently under development. It is quite well developed because the first draft was presented to professionals. So there are ongoing some training on this. So it will be Excel tool where it will be possible to select some renovation options, but it will not provide calculation. It will be needed manual inputs from external tools for energy calculation. So all softwares that are used until now will be allowed. What is very important and useful is that it contains the unit costs for renovation options, for renovation steps. This is very time consuming and also should be harmonized somehow for professionals. So this will be very useful. And it will provide also mandatory reporting template. What is very important also from the point of view of this pilot development of renovation passports we are doing now is that ministry assumes that there will be a testing phase when professionals will get this tool and they can play with it, and they will expect the feedback from this testing phase. So there is huge opportunity for this project to provide also feedback and experiences from these real building renovation passports. So what we are doing, what is needed to create the renovation passport for specific buildings. So there is we already did on-site visit, inspection of actual state, discussion with owners about his expectations and willing, for example, in our cases to change from gas boiler room to district heating. Then the next steps is calculation of indicators, which are energy, CO2 emissions, costs, indoor air quality, and we want also to provide the SRI calculation. Then it will be recommendations for step-by-step renovation and savings and all benefits estimation by calculation of indicators after proposed renovation and for individual steps. Uh, as was said and as written in directive, this building renovation passport is voluntary, so it must be somehow attractive and must provide more information than a standard EPC. So we will provide a better quality by hourly calculation step. We recommend also calculation for local climate. I will talk later about it. We will provide additional information about cost, SRI, and thermal comfort score. And what is important, result of this building renovation passport is that for each renovation step, they are always reported also EPC classes. So it means that it will be very useful also for public and green financing, for minimum energy performance standards, and also for green taxonomy, because it will be clear which energy class will be achieved by each step. And as we know, importance of EPCs will increase because it will be linked to all these policy instruments. So finally, it is presentation in user-friendly way to owner and explanation of individual steps. So a bit more about additional indicators which we plan to implement in our building renovation passport. I must say that it is a huge work, so our work is not finished, and these are just examples from other buildings we already evaluated. So firstly, it is a thermal comfort score calculation that is possible only if hourly calculation step is used. So this is a new option in Slovakia because recently we introduced in technical standard. It will take perhaps few weeks to really implement in standard, but we have a typical methodological year for hourly calculation. And we will use tools that was developed by Aldrin project, and it is also used in EPC recast project, and it is based on European standard 16798. Then we will calculate a smart readiness indicator. We will use official tool, Excel tool provided by Commission for this. And we will also use the measured energy from administrator of buildings if they will provide relevant data for calibration of calculation model. And we will use the tool for normalization to standard condition developed in EPC recast project. So this is this report on the left side. So this will be additional information which are probably not required by mandatory building renovation passport yet. So Slovak specifics, I have to say that in Slovakia, I think we are only country in Europe. We have 4 types of accredited experts who are involved in standard EPC development. So we have special expert for thermal envelope, for heating and domestic hot water systems, for ventilation and cooling, and for lighting. So there is potential for high quality recommendations. So this is a huge advantage for building renovation passport, because I cannot really imagine to give good advice by one person. And so it was a good decision in 2005 when we implemented the first EPBD to have these 4 types of experts, and each has his accreditation and stamp. The second specific, I think, I'm not sure if it is only in Slovakia, is the local climate versus standard climate used for certificate. So in Slovakia, we have a wide range of climate conditions. You can see on the left in the graph that the standard climate conditions are 3,422 Kelvin days. So this is a number of inhabitants living in different intervals of degree days. So you see that huge part of Slovak population, and it means also buildings, is in location with more than 4,000 degree days. So this has a huge impact on cost efficiency, especially for thermal envelope improvement and on the payback time for these improvements. So we would recommend a recalculation for costs, energy cost saving for local climate, because we have defined local climate for each village in Slovakia. So this is not needed in our case, because we have buildings in Bratislava that is approximately the standard climate. So about our selected buildings, so we have to prepare 2 building renovation passport. So we selected 1 school and 1 house of social services, a facility for the elderly people. So I will talk more about this school. So the selection criteria were the need for renovation. So it must be buildings that also that is not renovated, motivated administrator or users. So we have a good cooperation with Bratislava self-governing region, who is administrator of these 2 buildings. And we also took into account the potential for replicability. So you can see on this school buildings that our building is one, but there are similar buildings around in this district, and there are also in other parts of Bratislava. But we should say that this replicability is not really direct, because it must be always adapted to specific building, as they are partly renovated, and also the shape can be a bit different. So about this school in Bratislava, Petržalka, so the envelope is in original state. Windows were changed in 2007, so it is not the high quality. It has a gas boiler room, so they disconnected from district heating, and this was also the reason that the boiler room is from 2009, and it has centralized hot water preparation with circulation. So it is quite close to end of the lifespan. So it was also a reason why we selected this building. So our recommendation will be in this order: windows change, or perhaps only glazing, because we have experience from Bratislava that in some cases just glazing can be changed to triple glazing, but this is up to more detailed investigation before works and before start the design of renovation, because I have to say that building renovation passport does not replace the design of renovation. So it is just idea for design, not really design. So we will propose additional thermal insulation of envelope, heating system. We consider alternatives connection to district heating, because it has very low primary energy factor, sometimes 0.15, and or also perhaps heat pump. So this will be up to discussion with owner. And also there is needed improvement of lighting control, even if 80% of lamps is changed to LED, but there is no control system. So the main challenge with this building until now, because we are working on calculation, was the geometry of building, and that we had no drawings in digital form, so there were only partial drawings in paper form. So we had to make some simple drawings for calculation of geometry. So the last step will be presentation of results. So it should be simplified, explained in a user-friendly form. So we will use this IB Road project tool because we have no other, and also it is nice and it is intention of this project, but we will perhaps try also to produce an official Slovak building renovation passport if the template will be available before the end of the project. It should be in the summer available because building administrator is interested in official building renovation passport that will be obligatory for public buildings. So what are the main challenges? So it is the calculation method and the tool for calculation with hourly step for correct energy performance assessment and savings predictions that is important for optimization of renovation options. So we will use Italian software, which is based on Zen standards in this project, but I always stress that there is need for common European calculation tool and calculation or calculation kernel to have really reliable results on energy performance. Then these new additional indicators, there is missing some definition of the methodology and tools. There should be reference in legislation or just recommendation by a public authority about uses of these indicators, because now it is free up to assessors, and this can lead to very different quality of these indicators and of this advice. Then capacity building, training of existing accredited experts is needed, of course, because there is a lot of new aspects and new tools and indicators. And very important is the price of EPC with building renovation passports that will increase because building renovation passport is tailored, detailed calculation of several steps is needed and several new indicators. So we think that it should be strictly for voluntary use or obligatory only for some purposes, because otherwise the quality will go down significantly as with EPCs and the goal will be missed. Because there is also a discussion in Slovakia about mandatory renovation passports. So recommendations for public authorities is that there should be link between building renovation passport and EPC scheme, because it should be issued by the same expert, because there is already codified and existing methodology, quality control, accreditation of experts, so no need to develop something new. On-site visit must be mandatory, because there is also discussion about this, if it should be mandatory or not. For EPC, it is not mandatory and the quality is very low. So as I said, it should be for voluntary use, and obligatory should be for financial support of stage renovation and perhaps for all public buildings, but the identification of trigger points when it is obligatory and when not should be very clear and well estimated to not decrease the quality. So definition of methodology for additional indicators, it should not be free, it should be somehow harmonized to keep the quality. And also for discussion is how to solve the local versus standard climate for cost efficiency calculation. And as the last point, I would like to stress that one-step renovation should be preferred as the most effective solution, and we should not push to step-by-step renovation, as I see sometimes, because it is always more efficient. And I think if investor wants to make one-step renovation, he doesn't need to develop this quite expensive building renovation passport. So thank you for attention, and
Thank
we
you,
will be
Jana.
happy to have some questions.
Great. Well, I for sure have questions for you. I'm looking at the chat. I don't see, or in the Q&A section, I don't see questions yet. So for all the participants, please feel free, if you have any questions, write them down on a piece of paper or post them in the chat so we can tackle them afterwards. Thank you, Jana. We will get back to you after first presentation of Antonella. So Antonella, if you are ready.
Hello everyone. I will share my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay, so I will first of all try to briefly guide you through, because we are not the EU member state. And so maybe for better understanding, I will try briefly to provide you where we are and why we as non-EU member states are doing this. So, of course, there are the international obligations. This is one side. And particularly, I must point out this treaty establishing energy community, which was ratified in 2006. And this is the treaty between the European Union and contracting parties, which are mainly from the Western Balkans and former Soviet Union countries. So why this treaty is so important? It is important because energy community parties accepted to implement EU acquis in the energy field, in the field of climate change. And of course, there is the energy efficiency included in it. So from 2008, there was a working group established at the Energy Community for energy dedicated to energy efficiency. And that's how we started actually to implement the energy efficiency regulation. So as you can see, we are actually behind the EU because we started later. And that's why each time when there is a new regulation, the highest body of this treaty, Ministerial Council, makes decisions on implementation of new pieces of EU acquis. We have practically a new acquis every year. Based on that, we are actually also now revising our strategic framework. I must say that in the period from 2010 to 2021, as all the EU member states, we are switched in time, we were implementing major parts of energy efficiency policy and reaching targets through national energy efficiency action plans. Now we skip the energy efficiency action plans, and we expect in a step of Republic of Serbia, Integrated National Energy and Climate Plan, to be adopted during this year, where we will have new targets. Speaking about the regulation, I would like to say that we have, we are covering all the energy efficiency regulation. So the first law on efficient use of energy, which was covering mainly ESD and the energy labeling, and very small part of the EPBD from 2002. This was the law that was adopted in Serbia in 2013, and it was actually the base for the adoption of the NIAPs and for most of the policy measures that we were implementing at the time. while the main parts of the EPBD were actually transferred through the law on planning and construction, and the law on efficient use of energy was covering only part of the inspection of HVAC systems. So here on slide you can see the latest directive, the EED. We were by September completely aligned with the version of the EED, which was revised by these EU regulation and directives which are mentioned on the slide. So we adopted a brand new law on energy efficiency in 2021. And it is mainly this directive was covered by the energy efficiency rational use of energy law. This law also covers completely the new regulation on energy labeling, and also we introduced eco design. Still part of the EPBD, and of course the law on planning and construction is mainly covering what is of interest of the topic today. Speaking about the law on energy efficient and rational use of energy from 2001, we more or less kept the structure of the law from 2013, but we improved it and we tried to, let's say, align with the EU requirements. And maybe here it is important that to mention that we have this energy management system, which is in place from 2016, which was developed in Serbia with the JICA assistance, and which is from 2016, actually, there were some obligations to save energy, which included also the public sector, big consumers and public sector. And well, this is also one of the reasons why we had many activities in order to try to do something with the public sector. Also, we had here, which is of interest, maybe that we included some requirements of energy efficiency in public procurement, which reflected some of the programs of rehabilitation. And we also, which was very good, in the previous law, we had the budgetary fund. And now we established with the new law, Administration for Financing and Promotion of Energy Efficiency. I will say more about that in the next slides. Speaking about the law on construction and planning, it was first time included some provisions of EPBD in 2009. And after that, we had this secondary legislation, which is, of course, necessary in order to be able to include all the calculation and requirements more precisely. And they are listed here. The law itself has passed many changes, and the last one was in 2023. This the regulation on EPBD is partially aligned with EPBD, particularly regarding the energy performance calculation methodology. And the minimum requirements are not based on the cost optimal levels. Also, one important issue is that the certification is based on annual final heat energy consumption, so not on primary energy and not including all the energies. The methodology is actually present, but the national software was not there, and now they're working on improving it. Speaking about the two financing mechanisms which we had in the past, one was the budgetary fund that was started in operation in 2014 based on the law on energy efficient use of energy. And how it operates, it is actually just a budget line in the budget of Republic of Serbia, and it was operated by our department in charge for energy efficiency, and the main ministry in charge is Ministry of Mining and Energy. So how it provides grants, the grants are provided based on the public calls and eligibilities for public and private entities, both citizens or commercial sector. operation is based on the annual financing program, which is adopted by the government. And there is a rule book prescribing manner of funds allocation, which prescribes some requirements that have to be included in the public calls and set some criteria. So within this process between 2014 and 2021, because it was replaced with the Energy Efficiency Administration, we developed various types of subsidy schemes. But it was implemented just the subsidy for public buildings. This is the one which we implemented the most in this period. And there were also piloted in 2021. We implemented also some pilot activities with citizens. So our budget was relatively low in the beginning. It was approximately about 1.2, 1.5 million euro per year, which is quite small. But with the introduction of the law on fees, where the fee for energy efficiency was introduced on energy and energy carriers, after 2019, this was more than 4 million. The results, average savings was of this program was about 40%, but we had programs projects which had even more than 70%. The new law made the change. Why it is improvement when we speak from the budgetary fund to this Energy Efficiency Administration. Actually, administration is with the legal status of separate legal entity within the Ministry in charge of energy. So there are now people which are dedicated only to financing energy efficiency, which was not the case. We needed in the past to do it to award the funds, but also to work on all other issues regarding energy efficiency, including regulation. The Energy Efficiency Administration kept mostly the mechanisms which were developed for the implementation of the budgetary fund. In 2021, we had a really big budget, mainly due to the fact that the citizens were included in this program. But since last year, we have in implementation World Bank funded project source, which actually is covering now at this stage the residential sector. So what we did with the budgetary fund and later on with the Energy Efficiency Administration is that you have seen that our certification is not based on all types of energy. It is not. It is based only on the final heat consumption, and that is why we tried with all these public calls to make some additional requirements, so that because we are speaking about the public buildings, and we know the intention is that the public buildings, public sector should give, let's say, example, have this exemplary role. So what we did something because we were aware that energy passports, we wanted to, first of all, to have more requirements than what is required by officially by the regulation. But we also wanted to let's say encourage people to go to as deep renovation as it was possible. So we included, you can see here how we included scoring. There were some things which are, I don't know, type of buildings, because we wanted to focus more on buildings like schools and healthcare centers, kindergartens. So they got more points. We awarded points for implementation of energy efficiency measures. And these scores were actually built in that way that I will show on the next slide, we had the minimum requirements which they have to meet. But here we provided some incentives. So the more measures somebody implements in the project, the more points he will get. And we tried also through this criteria let's say, support switching from environmentally not friendly fuels to more environmentally and climate change more friendly fuels. Also, we tried to include all kinds of measures which are stimulating really efficient use of energy in terms of, for example, how the building automation will work and how the measurement will work to install thermostatic wells, which were not included in the buildings, and to have, for example, the pumps, which are also with the variable drive. So we tried with this to somehow attract people to apply with the more technical measures, because they were scored in that way. Speaking about the minimal requirements, so for example, what we did, we said that rehabilitated buildings must upgrade for at least 2 energy classes or be in class C, which is a minimum requirement. And that is our regulation requires upgrade of at least 1 energy class. Then we put stricter requirements for the building envelope than those that were included in the regulation of the Ministry of Construction. Also, for example, we have this air conditioning, and we included the highest energy efficiency class, which is included in the energy labeling regulations, etc. So we had also, for example, minimum installation of 10 centimeters of stone walls, but we gave more points if they exceed 12 centimeters and more. Additional requirements which we included, for example, was that measures on the envelope must be combined with the measures of HVAC systems, particularly speaking about circulation pumps and thermostatic wells. We needed this to be, we put this as mandatory in order to enable better use of the building and, of course, less energy consumption. Also, the HVAC systems must be, at the end of the project, they must be equipped with circulation pump and thermostatic wells. So it means that after the project, because sometimes it showed that people already did install something. So in the end, because I'm presenting you the last version of the public call, we put this application. So if somebody had those, they didn't have to include in the project, but if they didn't, they had to include. Of course, we're speaking about the systems which are really with radiators and let's say, really systems, not speaking about the stoves. If the project includes only measures on HVAC systems, the building must be in the class C. So we didn't allow the building system, in order to avoid lock-in, we didn't allow only those kind of measures. So they had to do everything, or they could do the part of envelope, but not HVAC if the requirements of envelope were not met. It also be limited, for example, investment per square meter, because it showed in our implementation. So here there are examples of some buildings. These are even from the very beginning. You see it's from 2014. So it means that we were able to estimate this cost and how we calculated the energy savings. Because we developed methodology, bottom-up methodology for reporting on the NIAP. We actually used that methodology, which allowed the combination of energy elaborates, which are preceding the energy passports, before and after the implementation. And also we included some additional calculation methods with, for example, if there was installment of the new boilers, then we had this specific calculation method, and that one was, by the way, also aligned with the EU. So how the scheme works for the citizens? For the citizens, it's a little bit, of course, different criteria. We offer them one measure in the past with a pilot, which was implemented in 2021 from the state budget. But with the World Bank project, there was we made some packages, which you may see here, the way individual measures, they can receive up to 50%. That is the same what we had with the public calls. But now we have also packages. So there is a basic one, which includes at least 2 measures on term and envelope. So they have more subsidy. Then we have the standard package, which includes the basic package plus some measures on the space heaters and the necessary infrastructure, as well as sorry, I missed to translate this. This is advanced package, which actually includes also now the renewables. You may find more information on the link here besides, and we expect huge savings. But how this mechanism actually works? It works in that way that the funds are coming from the World Bank. Ministry is issuing the public call for municipalities. Municipalities are very important in this scheme because there is a lot of logistics which we need. And on one hand side, and they're going and checking in the field the potential projects. And also they are providing half of the subsidy. Actually, depending on the type of the municipality, underdeveloped municipalities they participate with the 30% in the share of the subsidy. Those with higher pollution with 40%, and the other they participate with 50% of the subsidy. And the remaining part of the subsidy it's covered by the source project. So when the ministry, because each year the ministry is issuing the public call for municipalities, municipalities have to secure in their budget certain funds, and then they issue a public call, which means that they apply. It is more or less the formal thing. And then there are municipalities which issue 2 types of public calls. One is public call for contractors, which are doing the actual works. And the second one is for citizens. So since the project is lasting for 5 years, all the contractors selected last year can continue to work even in the next phases, unless they commit some actions which are not allowed. But in any time, any contractor can join the program. So it's a call which is constantly open. Speaking about the citizens, depending on the level of the budget, which is provided by the municipality, source is matching the funds of the municipality. There is a minimum requirement for certain municipality depending on the number of citizens. And with this joint budget, depending how much money is available, households apply. And they then, when they are accepted, we are not in the first year with the pilot, we did the scoring. But now we are not doing the scoring anymore because there were some technical issues which were caused by a lot of time needed to check the households which are included. So now the committee is actually the municipalities, they established committee which checks the projects. So they are selected on the principle first come, first serve. I know that this is not the ideal, but at the moment, with the human capacities which are available, this is the only possible way. And so when the households apply, they have to get some papers from the contractor, apply with those papers. And if they're selected, the contractors are doing the works, and citizens are paying their own share. While the municipality is paying directly to the contractor share of the source project and of the municipality. Maybe it seems too complicated, but in practice it is time consuming, but it's doable. This scheme is a scheme for multifamily buildings financed by we call it shortly Public ESCO project. It is done by EBRD based on a mechanism that was developed by municipality of Šabac. It is focusing on the buildings that are connected to district heating. It is kind of public ESCO where through the district heating bills, the repayment of the loan will be done by the citizens. So how it is organized, the EBRD is providing the loan and the donation. 50% repayment of the loan will be done by the citizens on district heating system bills. 50% investment will be repaid by the government. And actually there is this grant component which will help to overcome some barriers, to make the technical assistance, and to help with the energy vulnerable population living in these multifamily buildings in order to, let's say, not hamper the whole projects because we are lacking the procedure. So it will focus on installation of the envelope and, of course, measurement and regulation of the heat consumption. Both measures and subsidies will be based on the results of the study per each building. So how actually it is implemented. A public call by the ministry was issued a few years ago, and 15 municipalities joined the program. In the end of the last year, all the municipalities issued a public call for buildings. And the buildings applied, and then there was this criteria to select the most energy consuming buildings. Why most energy consuming buildings? Because one of the aims of this program is also to enable consumption-based building, which is not implemented in majority of municipalities in Serbia, because there is the issue, the buildings which have the very high energy consumption tend to disconnect from the district heating systems, and there was an issue in some of the municipalities trying to introduce this. So the idea of the project is to tackle the most energy consuming buildings, and once when we reach that, once when we help those buildings, the district heating companies could switch to consumption-based billing. And as you can see here, expected results, there are the results which are expected, direct results of the project, but additional serious results are expected by introduction of consumption-based buildings in the remaining part of the district heating system. So local self-government units or municipalities, they issued the call in the end of the year. Now the buildings are mostly selected. And for each building, there will be a study done by the consultants engaged by the EBRD. And they will be actually, for each building, there will be done some technical and economical, but also legal assessment. And it is expected that payback period will be set between 8 and 12 years. And because the idea is that the bills will remain more or less the same in the period while it is repaid the loan. So actually the savings will repay all the investment on the citizen side. So this is something, and now currently the phase is selection of the consultants to do the studies for the buildings. And once when the studies are done, the buildings which showed interest and were selected on the first list, they will be offered, they will be presented the results of the study, and they will be able to make the final decision whether they will be included in the process or not. Okay, this I don't want to speak very long, but this is the overview of some funding which was done by the budgetary fund and the EEA. What you can see, maybe only thing that I would like to point out that we had a much smaller budget in the past period, but the prices were also lower. So you can see that practically from 2021, the budget is almost the same which Energy Efficiency Administration had for 2 public calls. but the number of projects is almost half smaller because the prices have increased. Okay, thank you for your attention. I hope that this was of interest to you. I assume that we will have the questions later on.
Yes,
so if you give me just a minute to switch from one presentation to another, I will try to cover Tanya's part as well.
Antonella, I would propose, since we have 10 minutes left, that we do a brief discussion, and then we maybe can share the presentation of Tanya with people afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. It sounds like there is a lot happening, and you're having the requirements for public funding that you just presented that seem to have similar goals to for example what building renovation passports try to achieve, to avoid lock-ins, to tackle the worst performing buildings. I have some questions for both of you, and again, participants, if you have questions, please share them in the chat. I have seen one that I will address, but Antonella, because you were the last one speaking, I will first ask you a question, because it sounds to me, when I heard you presenting, that in Serbia you are looking at what the EU is doing in terms of policy and then implement or partially implement these types of policies at the later stage. So I just wondered, we have now this new EPBD. Do you think that that's something that Serbian policymakers are looking at when they, for example, are updating their own legislation?
Well, you see that we are still lagging behind with this calculation methodology. So as we are focusing still on final energy, we don't even have the nearly zero building requirements. And now you're speaking nearly emission buildings, zero emission buildings. So I think that we still need to go one step at a time. I think that the new EPBD, I was looking at it and was careful looking at your presentation. It is very demanding. I'm really interested to see how implementation of it will go in the EU. And luckily for us, we can learn maybe from EU experience, because I assume that Ministerial Council of the Energy Community will not have this yet. And then we also get some time for transposition. So hopefully there will be more time, because EU already gained some experience with the certification of all energies, with the calculation, and we have everything a little bit simplified. And people from the Ministry of Construction, they are now leading the working group, and they're trying really to put together. It is always difficult to put many people which are experts in this working group, so everybody having a lot of ideas how to do this and that. And I understand that their job is a very difficult one, but hopefully by the end of next year we will have in place this regulatory framework, which will be aligned at least with the previous EPBD. With the new one, and I assume we will have to wait for some time.
Yeah, thanks, Antonella. I think you're not alone in sort of being curious for how the transposition of the EPBD will actually take place, and that the ambition is high. That's undeniable. So we will have to closely monitor the coming 2 years what will happen. Jana, I also have a question for you, because what you mentioned is that on one hand there is quite a high quality focus in Slovakia when it comes to, for example, calculating EPCs. So with 4 different experts coming in that are required to generate the EPC. And I was just wondering, you also mentioned this first draft building renovation passport scheme that's being developed. Do you think that for this new building renovation passport scheme there will be equally high quality standards? And would you say, when we talk about costs, for the potential increase of costs and quality, is that something to be optimized, or should we always focus on good quality of these kind of schemes, even if costs are higher?
So about this, the first question was about this official building renovation passport. So my impression is that I miss these additional indicators which are asked by EPBD. So there are costs. It's very good and done with good experts. But they are missing this indoor air quality, thermal comfort, SRI, and I hope it will be allowed to be voluntary added. Because as I propose in many projects, there should be different types and different level of details for EPCs. So for different purpose, there should be other EPC, and also we propose a modular structure, so it could have some additional pages, for example, about measured energy, about SRI, about thermal comfort. So this will be my main comment on this national. But as a minimum, it is focused on these services, EPBD services, so it's okay. And there is at least precondition of good quality by these 4 experts, because even if you guess something, it's better if it is expert in the area.
Yeah, and I think maybe a related question there, and I think that also would be something that I would like to ask Antonella. I mean, I heard if you have so many experts that have to be involved, I can imagine that if we want to roll this out, we need to build capacity in order to have enough experts that can develop these kind of building renovation passports, but also other tools. And do you think that the ministry will also there was sort of this beta testing phase? Do you think that they'll provide some training for experts to get established in this field?
Well, yes. Are you asking Jana or Antonella? Sorry.
I'll first ask Jana and then I'll come back to you, Antonella.
Okay.
They already provide this training, so I participated in one of them. So they show what to do, what to click, and so on. And then they will provide this first draft, this tool, and they will collect feedback, I hope. And then, so there will be training, sure.
Okay.
Commercial, because it's already commercial.
Okay. Antonella, yeah, how is that in Serbia? Is there any capacity building programs? You mentioned so in the last part of your presentation that capacity was one of the challenges.
Well, what we noticed while implementing this grant awarding schemes, that the quality of energy passport was not the best one in some cases. And that's why we actually switched to the type of award criteria which we introduced, because we really wanted to be sure that the measures are implemented which we believe are necessary to be implemented. Even though there is licensing procedure by the Ministry of Construction, there is a training. So I'm sure that with the new calculation methods and things, there will be some new trainings which probably will be required. But also what in Serbia we're missing, this is this national calculation software, which is of course waiting to be, let's say, aligned with the calculation methodology. So we are missing still these key steps when it comes to this.
Maybe one question to you, Antonella, last question, and then I'll have a last question for Jana before we close the webinar. But if you would have one recommendation for Serbian policymakers of what is a priority right now to increase building renovation rates, what would you recommend them to look at? Would it be aligning first on the methodology? Would it be building capacity or something else?
Well, definitely we need methodology. I mean, everything starts from there. But as you have seen, and unfortunately you didn't see Tanya's presentation, we implemented many projects financed by, for example, the World Bank, from European Union, from SECO. So we implemented many projects, and they used some kind of advanced energy audit. So we didn't stay at this, let's say. But the point is that we in the because I was working in Ministry of Mining and Energy, we are following closely this energy efficiency policy, and we understand why some things are done. But for example, if some other ministries are having some support programs, for example, replacement of the boilers due to bad air quality, it is very difficult to convey the message that there should be upgrading envelope first. So it is very important that this is somehow included in the regulation, which will impede anybody to do something which does not include, as I say, energy efficiency first. I mean, everything is energy efficiency, but I mean, we all know that we have to follow
the
some
sequencing
logical
of the renovation steps. Yes.
And that's why I very much like this energy renovation passport, at least for the public sector, because I think it's a good approach to miss this lock-in, which we are seeing sometimes in the programs which are not implemented by certain ministries, which are, let's say, energy efficiency ministries. So it should be somehow in the regulation.
Thank you so much, Jana. Same question for you. If you would have one recommendation for policymakers in Slovakia, what would you recommend them to look at first?
So at first, it's also a calculation tool based on CEE standard, because many experts, they use own developed Excel tools several years ago. And for this level of building as nearly zero and zero emission buildings, it's not sufficient, because many investment, you are not able to identify the benefit. So if you have simple tool, you have the same result, even if you invest a lot of money. So because we have no certified, no recommended, no software, so everybody can use what wants, but it should be based on CEE standards.
Good. Thank you so much. Then I will close the webinar now. I'll briefly answer the last question, because I saw in the chat there was a question about what date member states need to finalize their national building renovation plans. So the EPBD right now says that a draft plan, a draft national building renovation plan, needs to be submitted to the Commission by the 31st of December 2025. So that's already by the end of next year. And then the first complete national building renovation plan by 31 December 2026. And in my understanding, this is not legally binding. It's a strategy that national governments pursue. So I hope that answers the question. If you have more questions about the EPBD, have a look at our report. We have there spelled out relevant provisions in a bit more detail. The graphs you've seen in my presentation also belong there. We have these reports in English, Bulgarian, Romanian, and Slovakian on our website. So have a look at it. I want to thank Jana and Antonella for their great input. I think what I take away here is that there are differences in which regulation is being implemented, but that it's very important that we have methodologies that works and tools that allow professionals to work with this. I think this conversation will continue at least in Europe, the coming 2 years, when member states will be implementing all these tools. Thank you very much for your contributions. Thank you for all the attendants for attending and for your questions. Have a great rest of the day, and let's stay in touch. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.